what's going on today? Maybe tell us, give us a little bit of an update. I know it's been busy.
Yeah, it's been a busy day, just kind of keeping track of all these crazy things that are happening around the overturning of Roe v. Wade, looking at what's happening in these states and how women are going to have to try to navigate now that at least 20 states and moving towards more like half the country are pretty much banning women's rights to make decisions over their reproductive health rights. So, been really following that very closely. That tragic case of the 10-year-old little girl in Ohio who was raped twice, who was pregnant and forced to go to Indiana to get an abortion. Going to be
Wow.
talking about that tomorrow with Frederica Whitfield on CNN. So really just tracking that story. I mean, heartbreaking, thinking about a 10-year-old girl who's raped and
Horrific.
uh, that it would be, that she would be forced to carry to term a baby. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I have two girls, and I know what they were like at 10 years old. So I can't even imagine their bodies going through and I've given birth, so I know what
Of
happens to your
course.
body when you give birth. So thinking about that process happening to a 10-year-old is just unbelievable.
It's hard to even wrap a person's mind around. So, I mean, how does this feel having daughters? Does it make it a big difference as well? Because, I mean, it must sort of give you obviously a whole different perspective.
Yeah, it really it makes me angry. It makes me sad, makes me disappointed to think that my daughters have fewer rights than I had. You think about the country evolving, and you would think that as we, as we go into this era, that we would give women, people of color, marginalized people more rights, not that we would take rights away.
Away.
So the fact that my daughters, have to decide what state to live in based on whether they can exercise their right to choose. So as young women going into the career, or going into their careers and into the workplace, they've got to really think about that. I mean, that's just insane to me that you've got to factor that into your decision about where you take a job or where you decide to live ultimately. But that is the reality that we find ourselves in.
100%. So I mean, and part of me, if maybe my questions come off as maybe not understanding it fully, because I'm here in Canada, so I'm actually just trying to wrap my mind around everything. So that's why we're here. Why do you think this is happening now, given all the issues that the U.S. is facing, with the economy and inflation and things like this? Has there been a lot leading up to this point, or is this sort of out of nowhere?
Yeah, no. This is a decades
Right. That's
old
what I figured.
plan, strategy on the part of conservatives, on the part of what people that call themselves pro-life, but I don't even like to use that term because if you're really pro-life, what about the lives of people that are already here? So the same people who are so adamant about not even having exceptions for abortions in the case of incest or race are the same people that deny women access to universal health care, deny women paid family medical leave on their jobs, deny women access to affordable childcare, affordable housing, access to minimum wages that allow for women to rent apartments and houses where they can actually raise a family. So they want women to carry children to term, but don't want to provide any support, any resources. So here is this irony when the Supreme Court and Republican lawmakers are, dictating what women can do with their bodies, that's big government. That's government intruding in the most intimate parts of your life. But then when it comes to taking care of that child, they say, oh, wait, we don't believe in big government. The government shouldn't be
Right.
involved, in childcare or housing or transportation. That should be left up to the individual. And then it's that rugged individualism that comes into play. Hey, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, figure it out. Other women have done it. So that's the irony here. Big
Yeah.
government when it's to their convenience and no government, when it's convenient for them to, make that their position.
Interesting. And I know it's been, debated for so long. What are your thoughts on the concept of contraception perhaps being an aid in this? Because, one of the main things I hear is people say, okay, let's give, free access to the pill, let's give free access to other contraceptives. and people will say, well, we don't want to subsidize your sex life, on the conservative angle. So I mean, what is the deal with that? How do we get around this issue?
Yeah, there you go. That's a great example of the hypocrisy, right? I don't want to subsidize your sex life, but if you live in the southern states, in certain southern states in the United States, they don't even teach kids about sex, no sex
Right.
education. So here you are, you're a 12, 13-year-old girl, boy, hormones are raging. You've had no, education about sexual intercourse, how you get pregnant, what happens, when you have sexual intercourse, sexually transmitted diseases. So you're sending kids out there blind without information, arming them with nothing but their hormones. And then you say once they get pregnant, well, you have to have the baby and then you're on your own. So it's not about subsidizing anyone's sex life, but it is about allowing girls, women, boys, families to make choices. And a lot of girls as young as 10 years old, we see this girl that's raped. At 10 years old, she already had a menstrual cycle. She was already able to be impregnated.
Wow. It's horrible.
So, I mean, it's just unbelievable.
It definitely is. I'm curious, how far does this go back for you in terms of your passion for speaking up for people, maybe without a voice, and sort of people's rights? Because you can obviously see and feel the passion, whether it's your panels or even just speaking with you here.
Yeah, I was just asked this question yesterday, and it goes back to being a little girl, really, growing up in a housing project in St. Louis, traveling on a bus to a private school that I went to for high school, and driving on this bus or riding on this bus through these very wealthy neighborhoods. So as I was leaving my little poor neighborhood, and the bus route would take me through these very wealthy neighborhoods, I'd see these huge homes, some felt like they were a block long.
Wow.
I knew that there was something wrong. Like there was something wrong with our government, that I could live in this really tiny little apartment, very impoverished neighborhood, but yet there are people that live in houses that are so big, I feel like it's a block long. And I didn't have words for it. I couldn't, identify disparities and, systemic racism and all the things that I now have in my toolbox as a, trained civil rights lawyer. But I always felt that there was just something wrong about it. I would ask a lot of questions. I would, ask the adults in my environment, why? Why
Yeah.
is it that, these people have so much and the people where I live have so little? So I think even as a young kid, I recognized that there was just some injustices and things that were unfair about our economy and about the way people lived.
100%. And then what was your first move sort of into getting on the air and getting in that aspect of it?
Yeah, I started my media career as a result of my civil rights trial attorney work. I was originally a civil rights trial lawyer, and I was representing some families in Las Vegas, about 5 families who had kids who had been abused at school by a teacher. And the case made national news because it was the first time in Las Vegas, Nevada, where a teacher was being criminally prosecuted for abuse charges. And the Dr. Phil production team was very interested in this story. And they wanted to talk to these parents. They wanted to raise awareness for other parents about what could happen in a school setting. And they invited my clients on, and as their attorney, I was invited on with them to explain the case and kind of talk about what was going on legally with the case. And that interview went so well that the Dr. Phil production team asked me if I would stay for a second taping. They were doing a second show actually on Dog the Bounty Hunter at the time. They had a reality talk show, and he had been taped using the N word, I think, when he was
Oh,
talking to
yes.
his son. Yeah, so there was this big controversy about whether he should lose his reality show or what should the consequences be for him using the N word in this derogatory way. So they asked me to stay on because they had a panel that was going to talk about it, but they didn't have a female voice. It was an all male panel. And I stuck around. And again, that panel went well. And from there, the producer said, hey, we'd love to have you back. If you have cases that you want to pitch to us, or if we have stories where we need a legal voice, we'd love to have you come back. And so that started my long career with the Dr. Phil team. And then I went on to co-host a show that was produced by his production company, the Emmy Award-winning talk show, The Doctors. And then the same production company created a syndicated talk show called Face the Truth that I co-hosted. And before those co-hosting jobs, I started sharing my legal and political views on cable news, and became a paid contributor for CNN. So that's really what started my entree into media.
Wow. I mean, such an incredible journey and, spanning so much. I'm curious, for you being a member of the media, especially on such large platforms, how do you feel that sort of the media has changed since you've joined?
Oh, wow. Big changes. First of
Okay.
all, the advent of social media. So,
Right.
social media is moving news and information far faster than television. So,
Yeah.
by the time you turn on the news or pick up a newspaper, that it's old news because the Twitter sphere has already gotten it. And Twitter has become that ecosystem for journalists, for pundits, experts. So, news breaks on Twitter. Doesn't break, used to be it would break on the evening news, breaking news, a reporter would
Right.
come on, an anchor would come on, would break. It's already old by the
That's
time.
it.
So if you're
Because
not
they
on
probably got it
Twitter,
from Twitter.
oh my God, yes. If you're not plugged into social media, you are going to be hours behind. And I have a friend, I mean, she is like on Twitter 24 hours a day. She's retired. She had some injuries, so she has some disability. So she had to retire from the workforce pretty early. Uh, so she is my news feed. So
She's
she's
your
constantly,
go-to.
oh my God, she's texting me everything that I can't even get to fast enough. So that's probably the biggest change is how quickly news spreads on social media and how those of us who are both in the social world as well as traditional media, how we got to keep up. You just have to know what's going on because opinions are being shaped and, attitudes are being changed as a result of what folks are saying on social media.
Very much so. Yeah, that's a great point. How do you feel about the trust towards the media in today's age? Because that's obviously something that's talked about in a lot of different forums, and how it can be a really big issue if there's distrust for the media, if that's fostered. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people distrust traditional media outlets, including big newspapers like New York Times, Washington Post, and a lot of the cable stations. I think during the advent of Donald Trump and the rise of Donald Trump in the political circles, and this whole era that we saw ushered in of fake news, people actually spreading and disseminating information that was just fake, and kind of the Donald Trump supporters choosing, to create facts out of whole cloth, ignoring, the background that I'm looking at, that's behind you is red and black. And those folks may look at it and say it's yellow.
Right.
And just run with that. And no matter how we show them that it's red and black, they are adamant that it's yellow.
And the comments have all the other theories in there.
Oh my God, yes, that there's some kind of, QAnon thing going on, or, there's some foreign country involved that's manipulating the computer and the color. So, just wild, right? Just gets really crazy. But we learned that when Donald Trump was on Twitter, he had like 88 million followers. So if he said the background was yellow to his 88 million followers, trying to convince them that it's red and black, it's close to impossible. So as a result of that, people don't know what to believe. They don't know what to trust. So there is a strong distrust. And I tell people all the time, look, even me, I'll see a story and sometimes I'll assume that story's true without digging deeper. And then you'll later realize that story's false. So with the 10-year-old little girl now, this is a great example. The doctor reported that she had a patient, 10 years old, that was pregnant. It was past the time that she could give her a legal abortion in Ohio. She had to call a colleague in Indiana. She didn't give too much other information because of HIPAA law. She couldn't disclose the little girl's name or
Right.
really more information about her. Immediately, the Ohio Attorney General said he didn't believe it. No
Wow.
way. If there was a rapist on the streets in Ohio, he trusted the law enforcement to find it. The governor of South Dakota said this is fake news. This didn't
You're
happen.
kidding me.
No. And
That's
then that
ridiculous.
became the rallying cry amongst Republican pundits, media outlets, that the whole story was just being made up so that pro-choice advocates could, drive home the point about the ridiculousness of, overturning Roe v. Wade. And then
And
two
these are
days
elected
later,
officials too, so we should
these
be
are
able to believe
elected
them.
officials. Oh, USA. Oh, media, Wall Street Journal wrote an editorial as well, challenging this doctor,
Wow.
saying that it was doubtful that she was telling the truth. 2 days
Wow.
later, dude shows up in court and confesses to raping the girl not once but twice.
Wow. That
And
is insane. That's almost like out of a movie in a very sad way.
And now the doctor is like in hiding. She's got a lawyer. She's thinking about suing folks who defamed her.
Whoa.
And it's insane. And Wall Street Journal had to issue a correction. The Ohio Attorney General, he didn't say he was sorry. He just thanked the law enforcement, community for arresting the dude. And I haven't heard anything from, Christy Nome from South Dakota. So, rarely are there corrections when folks do get it wrong. They kind of bury the truth. So that's why you can't. So think about all the people that heard the governor and the attorney general from Ohio and those conservative outlets that ran with the story that the 10-year-old little girl didn't exist. Some of them are still not going to believe that she was raped. I mean, they're going to be, because a lot of times now what we see, which is, again, going back to your question about what's different, people believe the news that fits their political agenda.
Yes,
so
100%.
It doesn't matter if it's factual, doesn't matter if there's evidence to support it. If it supports their agenda, they believe it.
That's so true. And it's so easy to reinforce that, right? Because the algorithms are just going to double down on whatever you believe. And, let's face it, you can put on whatever channel that's going to reinforce whatever you believe too. So do you think it's dangerous when people get in that point where it's like an echo chamber of their own opinions?
It's very, very dangerous. And it's almost impossible to break them out of it because it's just being reinforced over and over again. I was having a conversation with someone about the January 6th committee hearings, which have been explosive, which have been like must-see TV. They got an ABC News producer to produce the hearings. I mean, and they are just, expertly done from a media standpoint. They have cliffhangers, they have interesting witnesses. They got visuals that, would make any lawyer die in terms of, their use of inserting these videos and these audio tapes. So just,
is it as good as the Johnny Depp trial?
Oh, it's minus the big mound of, marijuana and cocaine,
right.
drugs.
Less shock factor maybe in that regard.
But it's pretty good. I mean, the president throwing a plate of ketchup, we could have had a visual, right, of that like plate and the ketchup on the wall.
That paints a picture.
Yes, that would have been one way to even dramatize it more. But I'm talking to a woman who is a staunch Trump supporter, and she says basically the insurrection was nothing. And so what? Because the Black Panthers stormed the Capitol as well, and no one made a big deal out of that.
Is that true? I feel like people probably did make a big deal out of it.
First of all, the Black Panthers did not storm the U.S. Capitol. One thing too, these people, they don't get past headlines. And although they're smart in terms of education, this woman has a master's degree, they're not analytically smart. So they don't analyze facts. The Black Panthers in the 70s walked into the Capitol building in Sacramento. So the Capitol building of the capital of California,
right?
Not the United States Congress, the Capitol building in Sacramento. They walked into the Capitol Rotunda with some guns.
Okay.
They didn't crash any windows. They didn't, have flagpoles. No one got shot. No one got killed. They were asked to leave. They left peacefully, went outside the building, and had a press conference. So that now has been disseminated as some kind of false equivalency to the insurrectionists in our U.S. Capitol storming the Capitol, trying to overthrow the legitimate, certification of the vote, making Joe Biden the president. And I'm thinking in my mind, does she think I'm dumb? Like, lady, I do news for a living. Like, tell that to one of those other like dumb people that you talk to.
That's the thing. The people who share the Facebook article without reading it.
Yes. And they'll then start, using those talking points. Well, the Black Panthers did it.
Exactly.
Like, girl, the what are you talking about? That peaceful walk into the Sacramento capital of California building versus the
and the crazy thing is, people were probably still offended by that, which
oh my God, and they thought that was as again equivalent. Somehow that was the equivalent of what happened on January 6th. And trying to convince, I was like, okay, I can't even because first of all, I said, you know what, if we can't talk facts, we can't really even have an intelligent conversation. Because if you're not willing to at least acknowledge that the Capitol building in California is very different than the United States Capitol.
Very.
And what was happening on January 6th to ensure a peaceful transfer of power is very different than anything that the California legislatures were doing. How do you have a conversation? Like I'm talking to
the conversation just dissolves like a house of cards at a certain point if you're not going to do that. I'm a doctor
talking to a toddler. So
exactly.
I talk to a toddler. Like just laugh and joke and suck the lollipop and keep it moving. So,
these are the facts. I'm curious how you feel about just sort of the current state of the U.S., the current administration. I think we're seeing a lot of people, particularly in other countries, sort of coming down on Joe Biden for some of his recent actions and speeches. I'm curious, how do you feel about this? Is this overblown or is this legitimate?
I think here's the reality in the media, whether it's social media, and I just had this conversation with a social media researcher expert. She's written a book. She's a professor at a college. Negative news sells, it spreads. Social media influencers get more likes. They go viral. The more provocative they are, right? So a lot of the criticism towards Joe Biden is from those provocateurs, those influencers who have figured out how to use social media in a way that gets attention. I mean, that's what Donald Trump was. He was the ultimate provocateur. And he would just say the most provocative things and people latched on to it. So that's what's happening with the Biden administration. Biden and Harris are just too normal. They're just too, regular, ordinary, the way our president and vice president used to be, not a scandal a day. They're not on social media saying shocking and provocative things. They have their agenda. Biden has been in Washington forever. He knows what the president is supposed to do, and he's just doing the job. But we have become so accustomed to the drama and the chaos of the Trump years. And we saw ratings on, cable stations were like, over the top, some of the highest ratings they had ever had. And then you go to nice, quiet, low-key Joe, what's called?
Low-key Joe.
Low-key Joe. And folks are tuning out, right? Nobody's watching cable. They're back to their, Succession and, House of Cards or whatever they're watching on Netflix. And so folks have got to figure out a way to get the attention of the viewers back. So what they've started to do is like attack Joe and Kamala Harris for pretty much everything that they do. And the reality is just the opposite. The man's been in office 2 years. He's gotten past the first infrastructure bill in the U.S. in decades. You remember, if you follow politics, every day was infrastructure day under Donald Trump. But there was never an infrastructure bill, never got anything done. He got a bipartisan gun safety bill passed. Haven't had gun safety bill in this country in 30 years.
It's a big one. That's a big one.
Huge one. He's got the first Black woman ever appointed to the United States Supreme Court in over 200 years. Huge. He's appointed more Black women to federal appellate courts than any president, hands down. Has the most diverse administration ever, even considering Barack Obama's administration. He's created more jobs in 2 years, and not just low paying jobs, jobs that pay $15 or more an hour. Yes, there's inflation, but he's not the cause of inflation. There's a war. There's
Right.
global, things that are happening that have an impact on inflation, and gas prices in the US are actually coming down. So, a guy said yesterday that there's all this talk about the Dems having a messaging problem. And the reality is, I don't think they do. I think there's a minority of Democrats on the far left, call themselves progressives, who have loud voices. And they tend to get a lot of attention because they say things like Joe Biden's not doing enough, he's too old, he's not tough enough. But the base of the Democratic Party is solidly behind the Biden-Harris administration. I mean, he won by more votes than any president had ever gotten in this country. So there was pretty clear consensus amongst Democrats and independents in this country that they wanted a normal president. So I wouldn't take too seriously a lot of the complaints that you hear. You have to check the sources. A lot of these people, again, they've been angry from day one. A lot of them are
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders supporters. They were very angry when he didn't win. They were, Democrats, some, who have always hated what they call the corporate Democrats or the institutional Democrats. And the Democratic Party is a big tent. We take everybody,
Right.
There's a
Well, it's-
saying that Republicans fall in line, Democrats need to fall in love. So, we're not one issue voters. Republicans are going to vote for Donald Trump if they think they can get conservative justices on the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. They'll hold their nose. They'll forget about the statements he made about grabbing, women by their body parts. They'll forget about everything because they'll be so focused on that one issue. Democrats are different. Democrats, we want it all. We want diversity. We want climate change.
Right.
We want voting rights. We want lower gas prices. We want higher wages. And let's face it, you're not going to get all of that in 2 years under any president. So,
That's a phenomenal point. I mean, it seems to me like the extremists on the left and the right seem to be giving their parties a very bad look. And you're right. It seems like that 5 to 10% minority in each group is getting the majority voice. That seems to be a big issue.
They're the loudest. Because everyday people look, I got to go to work. I got to, take care of my kids. I don't have time to be on Twitter fighting with folks. But when they go to the polls, they're going to vote Democratic. So that's why you have to, really kind of tune a lot of that noise out, because that, again, these people are not speaking for everyday people. And we saw that with Bernie Sanders. I mean, Bernie Sanders ran a phenomenal media campaign. He had huge rallies, lots of support online, but his people didn't turn out to vote. So, you can be loud, but that doesn't translate into, what happens at the ballot box. Whereas Joe Biden, I don't know if he could get 5,000 people at a rally. He did not.
He's not the rally guy.
He's not the rally guy.
But that's okay.
Are not rally people. They're working people. They don't have time to go. They had jobs. They're not, like activists that are going to be going. But they went to the polls and they voted in record numbers for him. So you got to just keep reminding yourself of that. Like, okay, this is the guy the party. And then I tell people all the time, because, there are all these headlines. I'm sure you've seen them. They want a new candidate. They want a new candidate for 2024. Okay. People, in 2020, we had a black woman, had a couple of white women, had a black guy, we had an old white guy, we had a young gay white guy, we had
everybody.
And guess who y'all picked? You picked the old white guy. So,
I guess this speaks for itself, right? You get what you vote for.
You had every opportunity. I'm like, okay,
that's a classic.
2 years ago. I mean, think about how diverse those candidates were that ran for a Democratic president. I mean, we never had that kind of diversity. And most of those campaigns went down in flames. They couldn't get 10% of the vote. So I don't know. Voters are fickle. Let's just say that.
Very much so. Who do you see in 2024 really taking the ballots by storm? Because, I mean, we're hearing murmurs of Trump and DeSantis potentially. And I mean, how would you feel about something like that?
Well, I just saw a poll this morning. Got to take polls with a grain of salt because they're often wrong. But I did see a poll that showed that 50% of Republican voters are now sour on Trump. And
Hmm.
so 50% of, Republicans are saying they don't want him to run. And, he's threatening to announce his candidacy as early as August or September. And
Wow.
established Republicans are angry and afraid because they think that could, cause damage to them in the midterms. And they know that Trump is not really a Republican. Trump is a one person party. It's all about
Right.
him. He
He's the
just
Trump
wants,
party.
he's the Trump party. And he doesn't care if announcing in September causes Republicans down ballot to lose because he doesn't care about them. So I think that is very likely that he's not going to be the candidate, even if he announces, if he pisses off the party by announcing in September and you see some losses in races where they thought they might have been strong, you may see the base of the Republican Party say, no, give us DeSantis, give us someone different than Trump. I mean, that has always been the fear is like, can you rally enough of the Republican base to beat Donald Trump? And this poll this morning suggested that we are at that moment now. So, we'll see.
Who do you
But
think would be the Democratic candidate?
well, Joe Biden has said over and over and over again he's running. And the
Wow.
Democratic Party, we do fall in line with this. You may have some fringe folks that will run against Biden, but nobody that really wants to be the president would ever challenge a sitting Democratic president because that would be the death of you. You would never
Hmm.
get the support of the party and you would go down. So, and Biden is getting frustrated. He's like, people, I've told you like 1,200 times I'm running. And I can't see any scenario other than him being ill that he wouldn't run. I mean, we don't have a tradition of a one term president in this country. Presidents in this
Hmm.
country need 8 years to get their agenda passed. You just can't do it in 4. So there's no reason that Joe Biden, short of an illness, that he wouldn't run.
Phenomenal commentary. The last thing I wanted to ask you about was being the founder and president of SNN, of course, the Special Needs Network, one of the leading disability children's health nonprofits. I mean, phenomenal stuff. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, super great things are happening, especially in News Network. We've been expanding and growing for the last 5 years or so, and we are very, very, very close to opening the first comprehensive developmental and medical clinic in the heart of South Los Angeles. I was just out a couple of days ago at the site, the construction site. Looks like we're about 75, 80% completed. Looking
Wow.
at December, end of the year opening of this clinic that will be able to provide comprehensive care to kids with autism, cerebral palsy, other developmental disabilities, kids who even have psychiatric, health impairments. Will be able to provide services not just to those kids but to their families as well. A whole, myriad of services from mental health services, assistance with housing, assistance with transportation, job training, financial literacy, and then
Wow.
those gold star interventions from ABA to speech therapy, occupational therapy, medical interventions, dental care. So, super excited about that. It's been a long, long time. We've been working on this clinic. We've had so many setbacks from COVID
Yeah.
to issues with our construction team, financing, financial issues, but we're almost at the finish line. So we're just, trying to keep folks enthused, keep them, motivated, keep their eye on the prize because we are getting very, very close to crossing that finish line. So that's what's happening at Special Needs Network. We're continuing to serve families both in person and virtually. We do a ton of virtual programs so that people all over the world can participate. And we've extended our reach, as a result of COVID, and we found that it's just effective for us to reach out beyond the state of California, and then we're back in person with some local events as well. So,
Wow.
just trying to keep the issue of the intersectionality between disability rights and social justice and civil rights on the fore of our policymakers.
I love it so much. We have all the info in the description below for everybody who wants to check it out. Areva Martin, thank you so much for your time. It really means a lot, and just keep up the incredible work.
Thank you. Glad to have an opportunity to speak to those in Canada. I love it. I
That's
love it. Love
right.
it.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Take care.